Are you looking for a variety of ICT resources for secondary English? Well, on today's Resource Review ICT Special, we'll be examining 3 that might just fit the bill. They are multimedia slideshow software, an interactive DVD of creative writing exercises, and a CD-ROM for improving reading. Recommending today's resources, we have John Hickman. John is Senior Advisor for Teaching and Learning at Redbridge Local Authority. On the panel today is Alan Mills from the Specialist Schools and Academies Trust, and Richard Austin, Head of English at John Cabot City Technology College in Bristol, and Richard's been trying out the resources for us in his lessons. Now, over in the test lab, our resident ICT investigator Matthew Tosh is waiting to give us a tour of the resources. Well, John, your first choice of resource for us today, it's called Picture Power 3. Picture Power itself has been around for a while. This version 3 came out in 2006. What is this resource and why do you like it?
It's a resource generated by the English and Media Centre in London, and it's a series of images related to different themes for students to engage in storyboarding, to show how meaning differs according to how one manipulates the picture or the text, and to come to some sort of understanding around inference and deduction and all those important things around reading and the production of texts. For instance, there is a set of images related to the suffragettes. So one could get students to engage in a process where you can generate a range of images which is anti-suffragette, if you were looking at it from that point of view, or you could look at it as a campaigning programme pro-suffragettes. So it gives them notions of points of view and opportunities to, as I've said, manipulate texts around these sort of images, both in an English lesson, possibly in an art lesson, certainly in a history lesson. It's very easy to use with a whole class, with small groups, with paired work, or individual in terms of the personalisation agenda. There's a great deal that an individual child could do. And at the same time, it does marry issues related to the media curriculum and the English curriculum with regard to both reading and writing. So I think that's where it's quite special.
Thank you. Well, for more of a tour of the software package, let's go over to Matthew in the test lab.
Creating a story through images is what Picture Power 3 is all about. Now I'm going to show you how the programme works by looking at a story I've already started. And on the screen here you can see is my main collection of images, and if I want to see an image in a bit more detail then I can double click on it and it appears in the window on the right hand side. Well, to add it to the story I just click and drag it down onto the sequencer at the bottom and I just drag it into the right place. Below the sequencer is a series of numbers. These represent the time for each photo. So I want this on for 1 second. The photos I'm working with here have all come with the resource, but there's absolutely nothing stopping you from uploading your own pictures for your story. You also have a choice of transitions between each picture. If you click on the border here, you can see there's a choice, but there's only a choice of 3, so it's somewhat limited, but you can still achieve some good effects nonetheless. You can also add sound effects and music just by clicking on the sound store icons here and dragging them down in a very similar way. You can change the length of the time as well. But in this movie I want to keep it mute, so I don't want any sounds. Most image and sound formats are supported by the software, so if you are incorporating your own, then this should be fairly straightforward. Well, it's time to have a look at my project so far, and I'll click on the view sequence and I'm going to have a look at it in the full screen mode just to see what we've got. Well, obviously I've still got a little bit more work to do on this project, but once it's complete I can export it in QuickTime format so that I can play it back in another application. And that's my quick tour of Picture Power 3. I'll hand you back to Hermione.
Right, OK. Richard, what did you make of this resource?
I enjoyed the resource when I started using it personally, but when I put it in front of the students in the first instance, some of them found it quite difficult to come to terms with actually how to use the programme, and it took a couple of lessons of actually teaching the programme itself before the students started to get any real use and any real benefit from it. But however, saying that, once they did understand the package, they did get a lot out of it.
Who are you teaching? Which level?
I focused it with Year 9.
Okay.
And it worked very well because it provided them with that visual stimulus and sometimes the audio stimulus as well, for them to use to actually go off and do their own creative writing.
Well, let's see what Alan thinks.
I think the resources are very good to start off with, the pictures and so on, but as you've just said, it takes a lot of time to teach it, I think. And in the YouTube generation, you've got children who are doing this at home, and they wouldn't have this at home, but they probably would have movie makers. Yeah. As you know, as was said in the demonstration, 3 different transition effects. You look at the effects that are available elsewhere. So in other words, I think the pictures are wonderful, but I think the actual programme that goes with it was almost a waste of time.
I mean, I take that point, but at the same time, I think that there are opportunities to open this out to all students, and I think that we could run aspects of this across from year 7 to year 11. And for me, the key to it is that I think that it will help to generate better writing.
OK. Well, thank you all very much. Sorry, Richard, we've got to move on to our second resource. We'll hear more from you later. John, your second resource is called the Write Kit, and it's an interactive DVD. Explain this resource to us and why you chose it.
I chose this because it has a range of different opportunities to generate writing. Because in each section there is an expert writer, a poet, a dramatist, outlining a whole range of issues around that particular genre, answering specific questions, and then you can move into tasks which the student can engage in related to some aspect of the media that's there. It's relatively simple, and therefore it would be giving students access to the minds of a writer and how a writer works. And again, I think that may be its most useful function in many ways.
OK. Well, let's have a closer look at the Write Kit with Matthew over in the test lab.
The Write Kit uses video as a stimulus and an advice tool for pupils. And there are 4 main areas on the DVD you can see here on the menu. If I go into one, you'll see for each area there are 3 activities, which means there are a total of 12 activities on this DVD. Well, I want to have a look at the hard sell one, so I'll click on the play exercise. Now, each of the exercises start with an introduction like that, and then you're brought to a menu that shows you the different parts of the activity. Now, a key element to the DVD is the films, which helps put each activity into context. And the hard sell activity, the film, is based in an advertising agency. So if we click on the movie, we'll get it underway.
A paper raincoat? I mean, why?
It's a special kind of paper that resists rain. When you're not wearing it, you can simply fold it up, pop it in your pocket.
I suppose you could write your shopping list on it too.
Generally, the films are very engaging and quite comical in places, and the film will continue into the activity, or you can get to it straight from this menu here.
Now, you'll be wondering what I want you to sell. What I want you to sell is this.
Now, once you've established the task, you can click on this Hints and Prompts button to get some advice. Alternatively, you can go back to the main menu and click on the Persuasive Writing Advice button. And this is where you can listen to professional writers talking about their profession, so children get real advice from people in the business.
What I like to do is read out loud my material. If it sounds right, it probably is right.
That completes my tour of the Write Kit, and now back to Hermione.
Well, John, you were groaning a little bit during Matthew's demonstration. Why was that?
It certainly wasn't one of my favourite parts of the resource. There are, I think, 2 or 3 better examples of how you might generate effective writing than that particular example. And I think, obviously, if anyone were to buy this, you would have to be fairly selective about which bits to choose and which bits to use. And it may well be that it is a resource that will be more useful for inexperienced teachers, perhaps.
Richard, what do you think?
I could see benefits of it, but I couldn't see benefits across a wide range of my year groups. As John's already said, there's better ways of teaching, especially that persuasive writing section, having a look at that and hearing someone else say this is what makes a good piece of persuasive writing and their own view on it. That's not going to engage my students in the classroom.
Can you just tell us briefly how you did use it?
I used the bomb activity, the bomb exercise on here with my Year 7 group. And I used it as a stimulus for some creative writing work we were doing. We looked at the movie and presented a scenario with some characters and then stopped at one point and allowed the students to then go away and do their own piece of writing.
So, this is where you found it?
It must have been, yeah. Yeah, this side of the field. Yeah.
But it gave them that stimulus, and some students do find creative writing very difficult. They find imagining a scenario, imagining characters, and coming up with a plot line very difficult to actually do. And so having that initial spark in their minds for them really benefited them. We had some good writing that came from it.
OK. Alan, what did you think of this resource?
I must admit, I found the whole thing very attractive, and looking at it, I kept thinking this is really good. I found it very attractive videos, I found the stimulus exercises really interesting, and I liked the way it was produced. I thought the style was superb. It's a lot of money. I can see it actually being one copy being passed around an English department, being used on a whiteboard, which doesn't fulfil all the functions of the actual programme, but would be very useful. I thought some of the videos were great. You know, I'd love to have those available.
OK. Well, now let's move on to John's third choice of resource. And John, this is a CD-ROM for teachers called Improving Reading. Tell us about this resource.
It's an interesting resource because obviously it's produced by the DFES and the Secondary National Strategy. And the two bodies in themselves have not necessarily had a good press with teachers over the last few years in terms of the dryness of some of the materials that have come out. And I'm really pleased that this particular resource has come out, because what it does is it actually has access to all the stuff that the national strategies have put out, but it overlays that with a whole range of issues that teachers are really interested in, related to generating reading groups, getting kids to think about how they would critique books. And this site actually offers a whole range of things for students, a lot to get through. But I think it's worth a look. If we just, for instance, click on subject leaders, and then we go to the site map, that gives you an opportunity to look at the sort of things that are involved in it. So that the 5 central areas of information gathering, improving reading, teaching, assessing, promoting and broadening and reviewing. And of those, the promoting and broadening may be the one that teachers will go to first, because it's where they are perhaps most interested in terms of reading for enjoyment and reading whole texts.
All right, well, let's see what our teacher thought. Richard, how did you use this resource?
I used it mainly within my department. So I've been very sceptical of resources that have come out of the DFES in the past, because they do tend to be quite boring and to some degree patronising of teachers. This one, however, was very different. There was an awful lot of good resources, an awful lot of good training material on there, and a resource that I would use particularly with NQTs for the teaching of reading and to aid their development.
Alan, do you share that positive view of this resource?
I do. I think it's an awful lot there. It's amazing how much is there. The only thing that slightly disturbed me was it seemed to be design overkill at various points. And I wonder why it's on a CD-ROM. I mean, apart from the video, there's not a lot there which couldn't be on a website, which would be much easier accessible. But it was, and I did little road tests on it with various people, and they were amazed by how much good stuff was on there.
Well, thank you all very much. That's all we've got time for today. But just to recap, the 3 resources that we looked at were Picture Power 3 from EMC Publications, The Right Kit from 186 Media Limited, and Improving Reading, an interactive study resource from the Department for Education and Skills. For more information about the resources we've looked at, go to our website. It's teachers.tv/resource review, or email us resourcereview@teachers.tv. A big thank you to our panel today, to John, to Richard and to Alan. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Resource Review. Bye-bye.